You are going to burn this. Not because someone found it, not because a magistrate came, because that was always the plan. You are a woman in Jiangyong County, in the hills of southern Hunan. You are writing in a script your husband cannot read. He could learn it. It would take him a week. He is not going to. And that not secrecy, not rebellion, not some brave conspiracy of silence that is the reason your writing exists at all? Let's get one thing straight. This is the part every documentary gets backwards. Here is the story you have been told. 1,000 years ago, oppressed Chinese women forbidden to learn to read invented a secret language. They hid it from men. They passed it in embroidery. It was resistance, written in code, under the nose of the patriarchy. It is a beautiful story. Almost none of it survives contact with the archive. Start with the smallest correction and work up. It is not a language. It is a script, a syllabary, roughly 700 core graphs, writing the local Jiangyong dialect. And it is not some independent invention. It is derived from Chinese characters. That last detail does something to the timeline. The script borrows simplifications that only appear in Chinese writing during the Song and Yuan dynasties. So the 1,000-year-old origin story is not just unproven. It is mechanically impossible. How old is it then? Here the honest answer is, nobody agrees. Fei Wenlu, working from fieldwork, says 150 to 200 years. Kathy Silber says late 19th century, with the first firm documentation in 1931. Victor Mayer, at Pennsylvania, says no more than 2 or 3 centuries. Endo Ori and Zhao Liming say, carefully, several hundred. I am not going to pick one for you. That disagreement is real, and it is in the literature, and a channel that flattens it to make a cleaner sentence is a channel you should stop watching. And one more thing to put down before we go in. You have probably heard that Nüshu is the only writing system in the world made by women for women. Mayer points at Japan and the claim dies. Hiragana, the Japanese cursive syllabary, was once called on-aid, women's hand, women's writing. Even the Chinese state news agency hedged this one. They wrote probably the world's only single-sex writing system. Probably is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Nüshu is remarkable. It does not need to be unique. And the reflex to make it unique is the first symptom of the thing this whole episode is about. Now the part I find hard to stop thinking about. In 1992, a young scholar named Kathy Silber published an essay in Miss Magazine. Its title was Nüshu, Discourse of Resistance. She wrote that the women's script was a discourse of resistance, that it had been used for nearly 1,000 years. Then she went to Jiangyong. She learned the script from a woman named Yi Nianhua, starting in 1988. She sat in the room. She stayed for years, the only Western scholar to work at that depth with the last writers while they were still alive. And she came back and said the opposite. It was not a weapon to change patriarchy. That is Silber. About Silber. She had a thesis that flattered everyone who read it, and the evidence took it away from her, and she said so in public. Hold on to that. We are going to need it at the end. You are getting married. Not to a man you chose. To a village you have never seen, some hours away, where you will live with his mother and you will not come back except to visit. 3 days after the wedding, something arrives. Your mother made it. Your aunts. The women you swore sisterhood with when you were 10 years old. It is called a sanzhaoshu, a third-day book. And here is the thing about it that no summary survives. It is a congratulation and a condolence. In the same object. Written by the same hands. Fei Wenlu documents that these books were performed read aloud in the groom's village. Not hidden, performed. Silber has kept around 40 copies of Nüshu texts, and in the third-day books, between the pages, she found things. Embroidery thread, paper-cut patterns. The book is a letter and a sewing kit. That is the register we are dealing with, not manifesto, not code. A woman telling another woman, the worst thing that will ever happen to you is happening. Congratulations, here is some thread. You do not learn this in a school. There is no school. He Yangxin learned it from her grandmother. Endo Ori recorded how the grandmother would sing, and while she sang, she wrote the graphs on the child's open palm with her finger. When there was no hand free, she wrote them on the ground with a stick. Consider the transmission medium. Skin and dirt. Nothing that lasts. Nothing you could confiscate. Not because it was designed to evade, because that was what was available to a woman with a granddaughter and no paper. Jiangyong wrote this, in Nüshu, about those afternoons. Endo recorded it. I am going to read it once. I often saw my grandmother cry. I would weep together with her. I asked her why she cried so much. She said I knew not of her pain. That is the curriculum. That is what was being passed down, along with the graphs. Not a code. A grief, and the alphabet to hold it in. At around 10, you swear sisterhood. Jiabai zime. Sworn sisters. You will do needlework together. You will attend the women's festivals together. And when one of you marries out, the others will write. That is what the script is for. Not the empire, not the husband, her. One correction, because it matters, and because it is the kind of thing this channel exists to get right. Sworn siblinghood was not a women-only institution. Laura Miller notes it plainly. Both women and men in this region made ritual siblingshoods. Same-sex pledges of fealty and friendship were not a female invention and not a female secret. The men had the bond too. The men just also had Chinese characters, and the road, and the option of coming home. Endo Ori, a Japanese linguist, spent 4 field seasons in Jiangyong in the mid-90s, working with the Tsinghua scholar Zhao Liming. She recorded the prayers women wrote and left at the Jiangyong temple. Here is one. Please have mercy on me. Please transform me into a man. Read that against discourse of resistance, and tell me which one is more devastating. It is not asking for the system to fall, it is asking for a transfer. Out of this body, out of this category, into the one that gets to leave the house. The records that survived do not show us women plotting, they show us women asking to be excused. So why didn't anyone stop it? Because nobody was trying to. Men knew about Nüshu. Laura Miller, an anthropologist, puts it plainly. Men knew about the script, some of them could read it, and it was ignored as unworthy of male effort. They had a nickname for it. Ant writing. Mosquito writing. Because of the strokes. Thin, leggy, insect-like. Sit with that for a second. You do not give a nickname to something you do not know exists. Silber says it better than I can. Men were not exactly clamoring to be let in on this secret, just as they were not storming the lofts demanding to learn embroidery. The script was not protected by silence. It was protected by contempt. And Endo goes one step further. She argues that the indifference and the absence of suppression are precisely what let Nüshu live. Some men even admired a woman who wrote it well, a talented woman, a charming accomplishment. That is not a loophole in the system. That is the system. You are allowed your own writing because your writing does not matter. This is not a love story about a secret. This is a cage with good acoustics. Except one man looked. His name was Zhou Shuoyi. In 1954, he started studying Nüshu, the first man to do it seriously. Here is how he found it, and Endo got this from Zhou himself. His father was a schoolteacher. His father's sister married out into the Nüshu country. And his father kept a diary, and in that diary he had copied down some of his sister's writing. So the script reached the first male researcher in China the same way it reached everyone else in this story, through a woman who married away and someone at home who missed her. The state's answer was to brand him a rightist. His materials were burned. He went to a labor camp. He came back, and in 1979 he was at the local museum, and he kept going, and he finished a Nüshu dictionary. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the kind of story that gets a number attached to it in a listicle. I have seen the figure for how long he was in that camp. I could not anchor it to anything better than a newspaper, so I am not going to say it. He lost decades. That is what I can stand behind, but hold the shape of it against everything we just said. For 200 years, no man in Jiangyong cared enough to stop this writing, and it lived. The first man who cared enough to study it was destroyed by the state within a few years. Indifference kept it alive. Attention was the dangerous part. Keep that. It is about to become the ending. Here is a detail that breaks the diary image completely. Tang Baozhen, born 1912, died 1999. She had a sworn sister named Hu Chizhu. They wrote to each other in Nüshu for decades. Tang could not write it. She never learned. A third woman, Gao Yingshun, read Hu's letters aloud to her, and when Tang wanted to answer, Gao wrote the words down for her. in Nüshu, in Tang's voice. So Nüshu is not a woman alone in a room with a secret diary. It is a network. It has readers and writers and women who are neither and still fully inside it. Literacy here is a service, something you do for each other, out loud, in a room, which means the script does not live in the paper. It lives in the room. Now come back to where we started. You are going to burn this. Fei Wenlu names it directly, and she names it as a problem for scholarship. Reconstructing the origin of Nüshu is made even harder by the local custom of burning Nüshu texts when their owners die, or burying the texts with them. Read that sentence again. The archive is thin because the women destroyed it on purpose, not to hide it. Silber says some of it was burned or buried so the writer could have it with her for enjoyment in the afterlife. This is the part that should reorganize everything you think about erasure. We say, the records got burned. We say it like an accusation. Somebody came, somebody censored, somebody lit the match. Here, the women lit it. Because the letters were not documents, they were belongings. And you take your belongings with you. The empire didn't erase this one. It didn't have to. It just had to not care, and let the women take their own words with them when they went. Yi Nianhua Silber's teacher, born around 1906, spent her last years writing Nüshu with a ballpoint pen on the margins of old newspapers. The strokes blot, the lines run, it is nearly unreadable. Not because she forgot, because there was no decent brush left, and no decent paper, and no reason for anyone to supply either. That is what the death of a script actually looks like. Not a bonfire, not a decree. Running out of ink. And this is the woman, by the way, who came from a family with some education, who went to school alongside the boys, which quietly demolishes the last pillar of the myth. Nobody banned women from Chinese characters. Silber refuses that logic outright. She will not say women were deprived of access and therefore invented Nüshu. What she says instead is that a script like this is consistent with a society sorted, absolutely, by sex. Not a prohibition. A sorting. On the 20th of September, 2004, a woman named Yang Huanyi died in Pumei village, Jiangyong. The obituaries called her the last natural inheritor of Nüshu. She was in her 90s. I am not going to give you a number in 2002, she told Xinhua she was 94, and her local authorities said 98 when she died, and nobody knows. She could not read a single Chinese character. She went to Beijing in 1995, to the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women. And she taught. Scholars came to Jiangyong and Yang Huanyi taught them the script. Several of them were men. Say that again, slowly, against the thing you were told. The last writer of the secret women's language spent her final decade teaching it to men, in a script her neighbors had nicknamed after insects, in a county where nobody had ever stopped her. So here is the ending, and it is not the one the poster promised. In 2002, a Nüshu museum opened. In 2003, the government created a job, Nüshu Chuanren. Nüshu transmitter, an official appointment. Yang Huanyi was one of them. Fei Wenlu tracked what that job paid, 20 yuan a month in 2003, 100 by 2010, and in exchange, the transmitter had an obligation to compose Nüshu on the government's request. Lu writes about a transmitter named Mei Yue that she wrote, and I am quoting Lu's framing here, not for the sake of lamenting her own misery, but to fulfill her obligation as an officially appointed transmitter. Lu maps the whole arc. It went from a communication platform, a social forum, something women did to each other, to academic property, and then to a government-supervised profession. Silber, who learned it in a room from a woman writing on newspaper, nobody's really writing it for personal reasons. The only people writing Nüshu now are official transmitters, in a museum funded by a foreign foundation, keeping it alive for tourists and calligraphers. Nüshu survived the contempt of every man in Jiangyong for 200 years. It did not survive being valuable. One more thing, and it is aimed at me as much as at anyone. In 2004, the anthropologist Laura Miller wrote a piece about how Nüshu gets covered in the West. She was not gentle. She noted that reporters always managed to work in a reference to bound feet despite the fact that Yao women in this region generally did not bind their feet. She noted that the press keeps calling it a language and a mystery and unsolved while 3 doctoral dissertations sat on the shelf. Chang at Yale in 91, Silber at Michigan in 95, Lu at Syracuse in 97. Her phrase for it was, bypassing the library. And then she said the thing that should stop a channel like this one cold. In the Euro-American mind, Chinese women are imagined as the victims of a horrifically repressive, male-dominated society. The idea of resistant female transgression is so appealing to contemporary sensibilities. So appealing. That is the trap, and it is not a trap in the sources. It is a trap in the appetite in what an audience wants a Chinese woman in 1890 to have been doing. We want her plotting, we want a code, we want her to have been fighting, because a woman writing a condolence card to her friend is not a thumbnail. She was not fighting. She was writing to Hu Chizu because Hu Chizu had married out and was never coming back, and there was thread in the envelope. That is smaller than resistance. It is also the only part that is true. Come back to the burning. For 2 centuries, women in one county wrote to each other in a script their husbands could have learned in a week and never bothered to. They wrote congratulation and condolence into the same book and tucked thread between the pages and read each other's letters aloud in rooms with the door open, and then they took their letters into the ground with them. That is not a code. That is not resistance. That is correspondence between people the empire had already agreed not to read. And when the state finally looked, finally decided the writing mattered, finally gave it a building and a budget and a title, it started telling them what to write. Kathy Silber came for a discourse of resistance and stayed long enough to lose it. She is the only person in this story who changed her mind because the evidence made her. We have always existed. And sometimes the records did not get burned by anyone who hated us. Sometimes we carried them out ourselves, on purpose, because they were ours and the only thing the world ever did was decline to look. Thank you to our family watching from Atlanta.